reading comprehension. So the passage that we're going to be reading as follows.
Highlight as we go along.
Okay, so the first text we're going to be working on is the one that's titled Woodrow Wilson. But before that, I just want to give you guys a little, I guess, background on the reading comprehension portion of the KC. It's 18 multiple choice questions that are going to count towards your score. So, you know, it's kind of important, obviously. So let's go ahead and start off by reading Woodrow Wilson. So it says to read the following selection about Woodrow Wilson and answer questions 1 through 5. So in the answer document that the answer sheet that I gave you, the questions, I have 1 through 5 listed in the front page. So let's go ahead and, do we want to go ahead and use one of our strategies from last week, which was to look at the questions, right? Let's go ahead and do that. All right, so the first question is asking, the author's main purpose in writing this passage is to, okay, so we're going to be looking for, what's one thing we're going to be looking for throughout the entire passage? The main purpose, right? So let's always keep a lookout for that. So the first thing we're looking for is the main purpose. So basically, what's the point of the passage? What's this person trying to tell us, okay? So then the second question is, which of the following is suggested by the author about the New Jersey Progressive? So that gives us another idea. We have to keep a lookout for the New Jersey Progressive, right? Then we have question number 3, which of the following conclusions about the progress of Wilson's political character is supported by the passage? So then that's another idea. So we have to look out for political character. Sorry? Oh, I'm sorry. Career. Thank you. Okay, so then number 4, read this phrase from the first paragraph of the passage. Okay, so we can do that later. Number 5, according to the passage, which of the following is most likely true about the presidential campaign of 1912? Okay, so that we obviously will understand as we read the passage. Okay, so let's get to it. Juan, can you read paragraph number 1 for me, please?
Woodrow Wilson is usually ranked among the country's great presidents in spite of his failures to win Senate approval of the League of Nations.
Mm-hmm.
Wilson had yearned
Mm-hmm.
for a political career all his life. He won his first office in 1910 when he was elected governor of New Jersey. 2 years later, he was elected president in one of the most rapid political races in our history. For a while, Wilson had practiced law but found it both boring and unprofitable. Then he became a political scientist of great renown and finally president of Princeton University. He did an outstanding job as Princeton, but lost out in a battle with Dean Andrew West for control of the graduate school. And he was asked by the Democratic boss of New Jersey, James Smith, to run for governor. Wilson readily accepted because his position at Princeton was becoming untenable.
Okay, so any main ideas that we're looking at? Or let's just try and summarize what this paragraph was about. Give me some important information. Because again, this is reading, you guys have to tell me what you read. You guys have to practice, okay? So what's one thing that you guys find important in this paragraph?
He won his first office in 1910.
So yeah, that is important. He won his first office in 1910. Aside from that?
2 years later, he was elected president.
President of what?
Rapid political.
Okay, so 2 years later, he was elected president in one of the most rapid political rises in our history. For a while, Wilson had practiced law but found it both boring and unprofitable. Okay, so what we know is that he has a what? He likes politics, right? Wilson had yearned for a political career all of his life, right? So I think that's important. Aside from that, so we already know that he was one of the most rapidly elected presidents, right? And he won his first office in 1910. Where did he work?
League of Nations.
He worked at the League of Nations? Where does it say that?
First sentence.
So, Woodrow Wilson is usually ranked among the country's great presidents in spite of his failures to win Senate approval of the League of Nations. So, we're talking about the League of Nations didn't grant him Senate approval. So, does that mean that he worked for the League of Nations? No. Okay, so, where was he the president of? He was president of,
Princeton University.
there we go. So, he worked there, and he tried to be what?
A dean. No.
Well, he was battling against Dean Andrew West for control of what? The graduate school, right? But he decided not to because that's when he was asked to run for governor of,
Was New Jersey.
yes, exactly. All right, so does that give you guys an idea? Do you guys understand the first paragraph? Yes? Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the second one. Rodolfo, can you read the second one for me, please?
Until 1910, Wilson seemed to be conservative, democrat in the Grover Cleveland traditions. He
Yeah.
had denounced Bryan in 1886 and had voted for the National Democratic candidate who supported both. In fact, when the Democratic machine first Wilson nominated in 1912, the young New Jersey progressive wanted no part of him. Wilson later assured them that he would champion the progressive cause, and so they decided to work for his election. It is easy to accuse Wilson of a political
Expediency.
tendency, but it's entirely possible that by the 1912 he had changed his views and had founded other Americans. While governor of New Jersey, he carried out his election pledge by enacting an impressive list of reforms.
Okay, so looking at what we wrote down earlier, what's one thing we have to keep a lookout? And aside from that?
New Jersey progressive.
Yes, so do we mention progressives at all in this paragraph?
Yeah.
Okay, so that means we have to look at it, right? Alright, so let's go ahead and read over the parts that say progressive and let's summarize what it is that they're trying to tell us, okay? So, let's see. The third sentence, right? It says, in fact, when the Democratic machine first pushed Wilson's nomination in 1912, the young New Jersey progressives wanted no part of him. Wilson later assured them that he would champion the progressive cause, and so that they decided to work for his election. Okay, so what did Wilson do? He basically what? Yeah, so he convinced them that he was going to do the job right. Is that right or wrong? Right? Okay, aside from that, what else can you tell me?
They wanted part of him.
Yeah, they didn't want him to be basically the representative of the New Jersey Progressives, right? Okay, so
I think that's important. That gives us an idea of what they're talking about with the progressives, right? Okay, so let's go to the third paragraph. Jocelyn.
Wilson secured the Democratic nomination on the court.
46?
After the fierce battle with Chancellor of Missouri and Oscar Underwood of Alabama, Clark solidly had a majority of votes, but was unable to attract the unnecessary two-thirds in the campaign. Wilson emerged in the middle of the road candidate between the
Conservative?
conservative William H. Taft and the more radical
Theodore? Roosevelt.
Wilson called his program the New Freedom. Is it which?
What she said was the restoration.
Of free competition as it had existed before the growth of the trust.
Okay, so let's stop right there real quick. So let's go ahead and, remember how last time we were working on the passages and we said to write down or highlight the most important parts? What have you guys done? Yeah, no, but of this current paragraph. Okay, so we are looking at his political career because that's what the entire passage is about, right? His political career. Okay, so what does the first sentence tell us?
Secured the Democratic.
Nomination on the 46th ballot after a fierce battle with Champ Clark of Missouri and Oscar W. Underwood of Alabama. So we know that his two opponents were Champ Clark and Underwood, right? And what else is it telling us? That Clark actually had a majority of the votes. So basically, it seems like Clark was beating who? Wilson, right? But that Clark was unable to attract the necessary two-thirds. In the campaign, Wilson emerged as the middle-of-the-road candidate between the conservative William H. Taft and the more radical Theodore Roosevelt. Wilson called his program the New Freedom, which he said was the restoration of free competition as it had existed before the growth of the trusts. All right, so is there something important there? Something I just read? Anything? Something that you think sounds like it's important? Any ideas? The third of the entire paragraph, which is in the campaign. Yeah, it's kind of giving us more of an idea of who. Well, I guess how he was appealing to the public, right? Because he was a middle of the road candidate. But I would say maybe the last sentence that I just read, the one that Jocelyn read also, which he said was the restoration of free competition as it had existed before the growth of the trusts. All right, so I'm gonna finish reading up. You guys make sure to highlight what you think is important as I'm reading, okay? In contrast, Theodore Roosevelt was advocating a new nationalism, which seemed to call for massive federal intervention in the economic life of the nation. Wilson felt that the trust should be destroyed, but he made a distinction between a trust and a legitimately successful big business. Theodore Roosevelt, on the other hand, accepted the trust as inevitable, but said that the government should regulate them by establishing a new regulatory agency. The former president also felt that a distinction should be made between the good trust and the bad trust. All right. Anything important? What was the one that we just highlighted in the first column? What does that say? It said what? What she said was the restoration of the free competition as it had existed before the growth of the trusts. the second column, is that also talking about that kind of stuff too? It is, right? Okay, so can you give me more of an idea, Juan, of what they're saying?
He felt Wilson felt that the trust should be destroyed, but he made a distinction between like trust and the genuine successful business.
Yeah, so basically we're saying that Wilson does not like trusts, right? Is that what he's saying?
Yeah.
Right? Okay. So let's go ahead and go to question number 1. What you guys are gonna answer, okay? So that way I get an idea if you guys are understanding the passage. So the first question, the author's main purpose in writing this passage is to A, argue that Wilson is one of the great U.S. presidents. B, survey the differences between Wilson, Taft, and Roosevelt. C, explain Wilson's concept of the new freedom. D, discuss some major events of Wilson's career.
The
Tell me why, Rodolfo.
Because basically telling us about his career.
Yeah. So you are right. You're right. But let's ask. Well, let's see why not A, B, and C. So that way, I know that you guys understood the message of the passage. Why not A? Look at the word selection of the options. A is telling us that they're saying that Wilson is one of the greatest U.S. presidents. Is that even mentioned at all? No. So we know that's not right. What about B? Survey the purpose is to survey the differences between Wilson, Taft, and Roosevelt. Are we talking about that? Are we saying, is the author specifically telling us what Taft did, what Roosevelt did, and what Wilson did? Making a comparison?
No.
No, he's not. I mean, some of them are mentioned, but they're mentioned and that's it. It's not like they're going into detail with what these other presidents did versus Wilson. Okay, and C, the reason why we didn't choose C is because did we mention New Freedom? Yes, we did. We mentioned New Freedom. But let's just look at the title of the passage. It's not titled New Freedom. It's titled Woodrow Wilson. New Freedom is mentioned a little bit in the passage, but again, it's not talking about it thoroughly. It's just briefly mentioning it. Okay? So, yes, Rodolfo, the answer is D. Okay, so number 2. Which of the following is suggested by the author about the New Jersey Progressive? A, they did not support Wilson after he was governor. B, they were not conservative Democrats. C, they were more interested in political expediency. And D, along with Wilson, they were supporters of Bryan in 1896. A? You think it's A? Tell me why.
Because they didn't support him when he ran for governor.
Well, I mean, I see what you're saying. That's probably the distractor. Because that's not right. So we know that A is not right because look at the other options. It says B, they were not conservative Democrats. C, they were more interested in political expediency, and D. So let's look at the other 3 options. Which other ones can we eliminate? Which one do we know is not at all a possibility?
B.
Why B? And why D? So Juan, why D?
They didn't talk about Bryan.
Exactly. So D is completely out of the question. Okay, so since we're talking about the New Jersey Progressives, let's go ahead and read over that paragraph again so that way we have more of an idea, okay? So paragraph 2, I'll go ahead and read it. And then you guys tell me. Until 1910, Wilson seemed to be a conservative Democrat in the Grover Cleveland tradition. He had denounced Bryan in 1896. and had voted for the National Democratic candidate who supported gold. In fact, when the Democratic machine first pushed Wilson's nomination in 1912, the young New Jersey progressives wanted no part of him. Wilson later assured them that he would champion the progressive cause, and so they decided to work for his election. It is also to accuse Wilson of political expediency, but it is entirely possible that by 1912 he had changed his views, as had countless other Americans. While governor of New Jersey, he carried out his election pledges by enacting an impressive list of reforms. So, any new information? Or anything that coincides with the question, the options?
You could forward it?
Well, initially, we remember we discussed when we first went over the paragraph that they did not support him. But why did they not support him? Well, what's one of the reasons? Remember, the first couple of sentences says what? That Woodrow Wilson seemed to be the first sentence. He was a conservative Democrat, right? And then it says, in fact, when the Democratic machine first pushed Wilson's nomination in 1912, the young New Jersey progressives wanted no part of him. So what's one of the reasons why they didn't want any part of him?
He was a Democrat.
Exactly. So which one of our options, is there any one of our options that is similar to that at all?
B.
B, right? So they were not conservative Democrats. So we can suggest, that's what it's saying, it's asking us. So number 2 is asking us, which of the following is suggested by the author? And it would be B. Yes, they were not conservative Democrats because they didn't want anything to do with him since he was a Democrat, right? Okay, so let's go on to number 3. Jocelyn, read number 3 for me.
Which of the following conclusions about the progress of Wilson's political career is supported by the passage?
Okay, so we have A, few politicians have progressed so rapidly towards the attainment of higher office. B, failures late in his career caused him to be regarded as a president who regressed instead of progressed. C, Wilson encountered little opposition once he determined to seek the presidency. D, the League of Nations marked the end of Wilson's reputation as a strong leader. Okay, so which one can we eliminate right off the bat? B, tell me why.
Because it doesn't talk about failure.
Exactly. You guys, so you know what regress means, right? Progress, it's, they mean the opposite. Progress means obviously move forward. Regress means take a few steps back. Okay, so we know B is out of, what else can we eliminate? The League of Nations marked the end of Wilson's reputation as a strong leader. I agree. Because, yes, in the beginning they didn't really support him, remember?
Yeah.
But they're not saying they didn't really affect him at all, right? They weren't suggesting that he was not a strong leader. That was not at all mentioned. So we have answer choices A and C, right? So few positions have progressed so rapidly towards the attainment of higher office. Or C, Wilson encountered little opposition once he determined to seek the presidency. What do you think? Did he have little competition?
Yeah.
He had little competition. Remember we were talking about he was the middle, right? Do you remember that paragraph?
Yeah.
Where we're saying he was the middle of the road candidate going up against William H. Taft and Theodore Roosevelt. So does that mean he had little opposition? I don't think so. He had two really qualified candidates, right? Okay, so then we are left with A. Okay, so then we have, read this phrase from the first paragraph of the passage. His position at Princeton was becoming untenable. The word untenable in the phrase above means A, unlikely to last for 10 years. B, filled with considerably less tension. C, difficult to maintain or continue. D, filled with achievements that would appeal to voters.
See.
Yes, that's right. You see how they try to trick you if you don't know that if you don't know the answer? The word untenable, just because 10 is in there, they give you that as an option. No, that's not correct. Okay, so then 5. According to the passage, which of the following is most likely true about the presidential campaign of 1912? So we have A, Woodrow Wilson won the election by an overwhelming majority. B, the inexperience of Theodore Roosevelt accounted for his radical position. C, Wilson was unable to attract 2/3 of the votes but won anyway. Or D, there were 3 nominated candidates for the presidency.
See.
Sorry, you said what?
D.
And you said C? Okay, so tell me why D and tell me why C. So you go first, Rodolfo. Tell me why C.
Wilson was unable to check. He was losing in the 2019 project studies. He was still able to win anyway.
He was still able to win? Well, I see what you're saying, but we're talking about the presidential election between who and who?
Champ and
Yeah.
Wilson.
So remember regarding the question that we just answered, it says the one with the 3, which question was that? Let me see. Oh, okay. Well, we know that we're comparing 3 different candidates, right? Because in the beginning it was in the beginning of that third paragraph, it says Wilson secured the Democratic nomination on the 46th ballot after a fierce battle with Champ Clark of Missouri and Oscar W. Underwood of Alabama. So we're talking about specifically that Democratic election. So Rodolfo, you're kind of right because they're referring to one certain election, but that's where you got a little confused because then we're talking about the campaign for the presidential election, right? So in the beginning, he's competing against Champ Clark of Missouri and Oscar W. Underwood of Alabama for the Democratic election. So you know how you have your Democratic representative and then your Republican? So he won the Democratic. He won against Clark and against Underwood. And that's why he was a presidential, he was the option for the Democratic Party. But then we're talking about the 3 different candidates. One was Wilson, one was Taft, and the other one was Roosevelt, right? So that's where number 5 gave us a very, very tricky one, which was C. 2/3 of the votes, but won anyway, was because we're thinking that they might be referring to the presidential election, but in reality, they were actually referring to the Democratic. So there was a little confusion there. So just make sure to keep yourself on check, realize those kinds of things. So, and Juan, why did you choose D?
There were 3.
Yeah, I kind of already mentioned that, right? So we have Roosevelt, we had Wilson, and we had, who was the third one? No, I already said Wilson.
Strand?
Taft, right? Okay, so the correct answer is D. D. Because remember, Wilson was unable to attract 2/3 of the votes but won anyway. That is true, but that's true regarding the Democratic election. It wasn't true regarding the presidential election.
That was Clark.
Yeah. So the one that won the 2/3, well, that doesn't really, I guess it's kind of just like side information, but yes, it was Clark. But if we were to look at question, answer choices A and B, Woodrow Wilson won the election by an overwhelming majority. Did they even mention that?
Oh,
What about B? The inexperience of Theodore Roosevelt accounted for his radical position. Is the passage suggesting that Theodore Roosevelt was a radical? And that he was inexperienced? Is that what it's saying? No. Okay. So let's go ahead and move on to the next passage. Elephants. Very, 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 very short passage. Only have to answer a couple questions on that. So, we have Delightful. Go ahead and read it for me, please.
to check the slip of the.
No, elephants. This one. Right here.
They were seeing that because of their size and huge
Appetites?
appetite, elephants would be destructive to the environment, but elephants actually use only half of the foliage they obtain from the top of the trees, leaving the rest of the ground as a food source otherwise unavailable to ground animals. By pruning part of the plants and trees, they also stimulate new growth in the dry season. They dig out with their forefeet, tapping into underwater springs and providing new watering places for themselves and other animals. In addition, elephants dropping provide food for many insects, and these insects in turn become a food source for birds. Indeed, scientists classify elephants as a keystone species because of their significant role in ecology.
Yes. Okay. So we're answering question 6. Well, did you guys understand the passage? Any questions regarding the passage? We're just talking specifically about elephants and their role in the ecosystem, right? The things that they do for other animals and for themselves. So, question 6. According to the passage, a keystone species is one that A, is essential in maintaining an ecosystem, B, provides food for insects, C, distributes nutrients through dung, or D, creates new habitats for other animals. Do they all sound right? Do they sound like they're correct?
No.
Okay, which one can we eliminate then?
So,
Do we even mention dung? No. So we can kind of just like eliminate that one. Doesn't make any. So what about B?
they do mention that.
They do mention that. So let's go ahead and keep that one. What about D? Creates new habitats for other animals.
They didn't mention that.
They didn't mention that either. So we're stuck between A and B. So yes, they provide food for insects, and yes, they are important in maintaining an ecosystem. But let's look at the whole passage. It is talking about specifically only providing food for insects.
No.
No, right?
With A.
Because an ecosystem is referring to
the overall.
the whole entire area. So basically, elephants are helping out with the entire ecosystem. And that's basically what the passage is talking about. Okay, so then we have, excuse me, question 7. Jocelyn, read question 7 for me, please.
Based on the passage, which of the following is an accurate statement?
A. Elephants' role in providing food for other animals makes up for their destructive size. B. Although elephants are an endangered species, they survive in a poor environment. C. Elephants show concern for other animals by leaving foliage for them to eat. Or D. Indirectly, elephants provide food for birds. Eliminate A. Can you tell me why?
Because this specifically the leaves food for insects, other animals.
Because what's right?
I don't know how you see that.
Which one?
This specific.
Specific?
But insects.
Wait, which one did you want to eliminate?
Okay.
Okay, we're looking for an accurate statement. So, elephants' role in providing food for other animals makes up for their destructive size. So yes, that's wrong. Because yes, they are big. We already know. When we think of an elephant, we think of something really big, huge. But they're not saying that an elephant is destructive. So, it's not an accurate statement. B. Although elephants are an endangered species, they survive in a poor environment.
Never mentioned that.
They mention that? They don't? Okay. You're right. So what about C? Elephants show concern for other animals by leaving foliage for them to eat.
That,
Sorry? You think that's right?
no,
Tell me why.
because they already mentioned it in
Number
number 8.
8?
It's kind of just like they already meant. I don't think they only provide food for ants, insects.
Well, the reason why I would eliminate 7 is because we're looking for an accurate statement, right? So, yes, they do mention that elephants leave foliage for them to eat, for other animals to eat. So basically, you know, like they're the ones that prune the trees and all that good stuff. So we kind of have an idea that that's kind of accurate. But it's saying that elephants show concern.
Really don't.
They don't show concern. I mean, I don't see how they would. So we know that's kind of just off. Again, pay specific attention to the words that they decide to use when giving you options and when giving you the questions. That's why, you know, obviously sometimes when they ask you questions and it says what is not the answer, they make sure to capitalize every single letter in that not to make sure you realize that kind of stuff. So because sometimes when you're going through a test, you overlook it and you don't really pay that much close attention to that kind of stuff. So we have answer choice D, indirectly elephants provide food for birds. So yes, that is true. We already know that because they mention it in the text. All right, so then we have one last passage, which is our longer one. Okay, so it's titled Marked for Extinction by Kim Clark. A new law hastens the Czechs' demise, but is that a good thing? Alright, so we're gonna go ahead and rotate. So Rodolfo, then Jocelyn, then Juan, then me. We're gonna read paragraphs like that, okay? So go ahead and start.
The check that slip, a valuable paper that is an ingrained part of American financial life, is headed toward cancellation. The rise of cheaper and faster payment alternative
Alternatives?
Alternatives such as credit cards, debit cards, and online banking started eating into the check market share in the 1990s, and the next month a new law takes effect and will eliminate many of the check's few remaining advantages for consumers. As a result, the current 4% a year decline in the check writing is expected to accelerate. Within a generation, checks are likely to be rarely used only by a few stubborn outliers or special situations such as giving a nephew money as a graduation gift.
Okay. So, just by reading the intro sentence and the rest of the following paragraph, what do we know?
That it's saying that the college checks are not going to be used
Yes.
in the future.
Okay, exactly. We know that checks are becoming a rarity. That's a specific word that they use in the text. You guys know what rarity means, right?
And like they're hard to be
Yeah. So it's rare for someone to use checks because what does everyone have nowadays?
credit cards.
They have credit cards and debit cards. You know, so, well, for me, for example, when I was younger, my dad would pay the grocery store bill with a check. Now it's all debit card. So it's definitely becoming rare. Not very many people are using it. So what else do we know? That It-
So that's pretty much it.
So it's also telling us though, and next month a new law takes effect that will eliminate many of the check's few remaining advantages for consumers. So we know that this person thinks that there's some advantages of using checks, right? And then aside from that, we also know that 4% a year decline in check writing is expected to accelerate. The current 4% a year decline in check writing is expected to accelerate. So, within a generation, checks are likely to be a rarity. So yes, like Rodolfo said, basically the entire first paragraph is telling us that the usage of checks is going to decline and it's going to continue declining. All right, so next paragraph, Jocelyn.
Many consumers and business say checks are so unsecure and expensive that their demands can come soon enough. But some consumers advocates and fraud experts warn that while paper checks are vulnerable for forgeries, they
Nevertheless,
provide more privacy and security than many of today's electronic
alternatives.
There are a lot of strong controls on all the doors into checking accounts, safe.
Mhm.
Vice President of Stanford, found based on research firm Gartner, and there are a lot of doors.
Okay, so what do we know?
And many consumer and business say that checks are so antiquated and expensive that they might can't consume enough.
Okay, so it's telling us basically, that's basically like a transition from the previous paragraph. It's telling us that it's old. Consumers don't use it anymore, right? But then it's telling us after the but in the second sentence, what is it saying?
Consumers advocate fraud.
Yeah. So some consumer advocates and fraud experts, so people that study this kind of stuff, are telling us that even though paper checks are vulnerable to forgers, you guys know what forgers are? Yes? People that forge basically false signatures, false papers, documents, stuff like that. Those are forgers. And sign for you, which, you know, sometimes, I don't want to say sometimes, but you know, getting someone to sign for your paper when they shouldn't. That's basically what a forger is. So, the consumer advocates and fraud experts are saying that although paper checks are vulnerable to forgers, people tend to forge those kinds of documents, it's still, by saying nevertheless, it still provides more privacy and security than many of today's electronic alternatives. So, do you guys remember, let's just apply this to ourselves. Do you guys remember how a major company basically was hacked into and they stole all of the credit card information of millions of people? That's the kind of stuff that happens. And they're suggesting that with checks, that doesn't happen. Because it's I guess it's an older alternative. Alright, so what else do we know? So basically the writer is suggesting that it offers more privacy and security than many of today's electronic alternatives. Even though, as Rodolfo mentioned, it's antiquated. Sorry?
Can you say it's much more better than?
Well, it's safe. It's safer. Yeah. And then it says there aren't a lot of strong controls on all the doors into checking accounts, which is a quote that was given to us by the author through Aviva Litton. Okay, so Juan, next paragraph.
Still the thing on the check seems okay.
You can't see it? Okay. Oh, it's a little dark. I'll go ahead and read it. Americans wrote a peak of 50 billion checks a year in the mid-1990s, but this year will very likely pen only about 37 billion. Meanwhile, the use of electronic payment methods is skyrocketing. Credit cards are now used 23 billion times a year, according to the Nielsen report, which monitors the payment industry. In the 1990s, debit and check cards became popular. Debit cards, also known as ATM cards, require a personal identification number, while check cards require only a signature, and sometimes not even that. Both immediately withdraw funds from your bank account. Consumers have doubled their use of debit cards in the past 4 years and now use them nearly 19 billion times annually, the Nielsen report estimates. So, here, what are they doing?
You're saying that they are also known as ATM cards require a personal identification number, so check cards require only a signature and sometimes not even that.
Yeah, but it's basically what are we doing? We're making a comparison between what and what. Using a exactly. So that's giving us more of an idea of the numbers that go with it. So it's showing us that obviously the debit card's a new way of paying for things. It's a debit card and it's used at a higher rate than checks, right? So that's what's making a comparison. So in the previous paragraph, we know that the author is arguing that even though it's old, it is a secure form of payment because you avoid, the risk of going any electronic security breach or anything like that, right? And then before that, we also know that because it's a little older, it's a much older form of payment, it's going down substantially. A lot of people are not using those checks. And in this current paragraph, we know that they're making a comparison between the two. All right, so can you see the next paragraph? Yeah? Okay, go ahead and read that one.
In addition, banks and businesses began to cut down on paper money operating in the mid-1970s called the automated clearing house that allows members to electronically transfer funds, mass separating all kinds of e-payments such as direct deposit and automatic bill payment, where consumers get business permission to debit their checking account to pay on the bill for
Mortgages.
This year, the ACH says it will handle nearly 8 billion payments of 40% from today.
Okay. So what do we know from this paragraph?
refers to electronically transfer funds as the e-payment such as direct deposit, online banking, and automatic bill payment where consumers give billing permission to debit their checking account to pay monthly bill like more.
Yeah. So basically what we're saying is that because banks and businesses are eager to what? Cut down on paper, that's one of the reasons why a lot of people prefer to use debit cards also. Because banks and businesses themselves do not want to keep using the papers that you have to use for checks, right? So as a result, e-payments such as direct deposit, online banking, and automatic bill payment, that's what's going up also because people are using these debit cards, right? And I mean, we know like if you go online and you try to make a payment for something, maybe you guys don't know this when you get a little older, but you can set up an online bill paying system where it automatically deducts a certain amount of money to make your payment on a monthly basis. All right, so then the following paragraph. Go ahead and read that a little for me.
As we saw last year, for the first time, more shoppers choose plastic over paper for payment. The reason for the switch are here. Electronic payment are faster, easier, and cheaper for shoppers, merchants, and banks alike. Banks, for example, have to transfer an estimated 101 million check weigh 163 tons each day at a cost of about 16 cents a piece. During the e-payment through the ACH card, banks only about 2 cents. So banks are using alternative carrots and sticks to herd consumers into the electronic payment highway. Wells Fargo, for example, offers frequent flyer miles to consumers who buy, say, their groceries with debit cards instead of checks. So many lenders such as student loan giants, Rally, May, give discounts to those who have monthly loan payments automatically debit from their checking accounts.
Yes. Okay, so this paragraph is telling us one of the reasons why they're switching over to online bill paying, right?
Yeah.
And what's one of the reasons? It's faster and easier. And what's another reason? It's cheaper, right? So in a test, you can kind of note that for yourself. This paragraph is telling us that this is why they're switching over. It's cheaper and it's faster, right? Okay, so that's basically, it's just providing us examples of, you know, the incentives that some companies are giving their customers. For example, Wells Fargo's, they're saying that Wells Fargo offers you frequent flyer miles if you use a debit card instead of checks, right? Because you're saving them money. Okay, so then we have the following paragraph. Go ahead and read that, Jocelyn, please.
During the term, the drive to go electronic will most likely shift into hyperspeed when the check clearing for 21st Century Act or Check 21 takes effect on October 28th. The law inspired by the deficits caused by grounding of planes after 9/11 will allow banks, retailers, and others to replace paper checks they receive with electronic versions.
Okay, so what do we know now?
And the pay, that, I don't know whether it's needed.
The drive to go electronic will most likely shift into hyperspeed when the check clearing for the 21st Century Act or Check 21 takes effect on October 28th. Yes. And that will in turn allow banks, retailers, and other places to replace paper checks, as we were saying, everywhere else. Okay, so then we have the potential savings through bankers, but Check 21 voids many of the things that check writers like. The law, for example, will allow banks, retailers, and businesses to destroy the original paper checks they receive. That will be a disappointment to the more than 45 million banking customers who currently get their checks back with their monthly statements. They will be able to get copies of the substitute checks, as the new e-checks are called, but often only if they ask. And consumers who write a check to the dry cleaners on Wednesday hoping to take advantage of the flow until payday on Friday are in for a shock. Their accounts will be debited much sooner. Alright, so what are we talking about here?
Saying that when people like check like on Wednesday and then they like cash it on Fridays.
Well, they're saying that that's going to be, that was the case before. Now it's saying that that's no longer the case, because before, you'd be able to write a check and the transaction won't have been processed until Friday. Let's just say that's your payday. So you kind of give yourself that reassurance that you're going to be able to pay for that. But now they're saying that the accounts will be debited a little bit sooner. But in addition to that, it's also telling us that, what else is it telling us? That
No, I will allow banks retailers and business to destroy the original paper check.
yeah, so basically they're saying that when you write a check before, I mean by request, but you could receive a copy of that check. So that way you know where it went, you know that it was paid. But now, retailers, banks, and businesses can destroy them without your consent. Right? And that's kind of bad. That's what this person is saying, the author is saying is bad. Okay, so following paragraph. The big question, how safe are the new electronic payments? Many in the banking industry insist that eliminating paper increases security. Checks printed with a name, address, and account number have long been notorious aids to identity thieves. And banks lose about $700 million to spurious checks each year. Retailers suffer even more from bad checks, says John Hall, spokesman for the American Bankers Association. Speeding up clearing will cut down on scams such as check kidding, where con artists play the float of one bank against another. Banks will be able to stop payment quicker and have a better chance of apprehending the criminal. Hall says. In addition, the rate of bogus e-checks is far below that of paper checks, he says. All right, so what do we know? What's one piece of information that they're giving us that's kind of important? Sounds important. The fourth? So you got 1, 2, 3. The one that says retailers?
And banks use about 700 million to checks each year.
Yes. So retailers suffer even more from bad checks. Basically, they're saying, now we're looking at the disadvantages of using a check, right? They're saying that, a lot of fraud is going on. People write bad checks. And because of that, businesses and banks are losing a lot of money because the banks have to pay fees and the businesses are losing out on their money because people are trying to pay with checks that don't have money in them, right? Okay, so then we have, I'm just going to go ahead and read the last portion because of time, we're kind of running out. But some consumer and fraud experts say the very things that make checks a hassle also serve as a protection against the kind of privacy invasions and scams that are becoming rampant. By turning checks into electronic images, banks could collect the kind of financial data about consumers that credit card companies have long amassed. And those files will be at least as vulnerable to hackers as credit card databases have been. A computer filled with hundreds of credit card numbers at the headquarters of BJ's Wholesale Club in Natick, Massachusetts, for example,
was hacked earlier this year. Perfect con. Frank Abagnale, whose life as a check swindler was portrayed in the recent movie Catch Me If You Can, says the digitization of payments is a forger's dream come true. For all their faults, paper checks can at least be dusted for fingerprints and provide other clues. Abagnale, who now lectures on financial security, says that Check 21 and recent technological advances are making it harder to prosecute financial fraud. His payment choice, a credit card, because federal law caps its liability at $50 in unauthorized charges. All right, so what are we talking about in the last two paragraphs? That although they're saying that checks are a great form of fraud, which we already mentioned previously in the beginning, what is it saying? What else? Well, it's using the example of that movie Catch Me If You Can, right? It's saying that this whole digital world, what we're turning into with the debit card, credit card transactions, that's basically a forger's dream come true. Because for all of their faults, paper checks can at least be dusted for fingerprints and provide other clues. When it comes to digital stuff, none of that is existent. You can't find any way. All right, so we're just gonna answer a few questions, and then I'll provide you with a few more towards the end if you guys would like some copies. And I'll give you one extra passage so that you guys can practice on your own, okay? All right, so question number 8. All of the following illustrate why electronic payments are becoming so popular, except A, banks are offering incentives to use them. Is that true?
Yeah.
Yes, it is true. Remember, because we talked about Wells Fargo, right?
Yeah.
Then we have B, they are faster than checks.
Yeah.
They're faster? Yes, they are. We have C, they are cheaper than checks.
Yeah.
Yes. So that leaves us D, the databases that serve them cannot be penetrated by hackers. Alright, so we know the answer is D. Okay, so then we have question number 9. Based on the article, which of the following statements is true? A, most states provide refunds of unauthorized demand drafts. B, electronic bill payments allow banks to stop payments quicker. C, debit card use has decreased in recent years. D, almost no one in America gets their canceled checks back with their monthly statements.
B.
You're saying that that is true. That B is true? Electronic bill payments allow banks to stop payments quicker.
Bye.
Bye. I mean, you're right, but I kind of want to know why not A, C, and D. Why not A? Yes. Okay, so which of the following is true? So we don't talk about that, so we don't even know if that's true or not. Okay, so then we know C, we know the answer is B. But why not C? Debit card use has decreased in recent years. Because it's increased, yes. And D, almost no one in America gets their canceled checks back with their monthly statements. Look at the wording. Remember how we mentioned that you can get your checks back, but that people they don't do it as much. So it says almost no one in America. That's not true. People still get them back. It's by request though. Okay, so we know the answer is B. So we answered questions 8 and 9. Do we want to do one more? Or are we, I know. I would write it on the board. One more? Just one more. Okay. 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 So I'm gonna read to you the sentence and you're gonna have to try and tell me which one of these definitions you think is right. Okay? Americans wrote a peak of 50 billion checks a year in the mid 1990s, but this year will very likely pen only about 37 billion. A, to write, B, to erase, C, to imprison, or D, to enclose. Shall I repeat the sentence? One more. Americans wrote a peak of 50 billion checks a year in the mid 1990s, but this year will very likely pen only about 37 billion. To write? That is correct. But why is it not to erase? Because that makes no sense. What about C? To imprison? No, because we're not talking about incarcerating anyone. And D, to enclose, because it's not enclosed. Encloses is within, right? Okay, so I think we're done for today. If you guys want to stick around for like 2 minutes, I can give you guys copies of another passage. But that's all of you guys needed. So come back next week.